Hello. I hope everything's going well. Tyler Bryden here. Recently, I posted a video talking about preparation for my first DMT experience in an undisclosed place with undisclosed people, all the good stuff that goes along with that. And today, what I wanted to share was, I guess, what people would deem a trip report of that first experience. And so I think right away, the first disclaimer I would like to make is this is strictly for informational purposes. I'm not encouraging this. There's a wealth of material online about psychedelic substances, specifically DMT, some really good ones, some probably not as good ones. And I think everyone here, needs to use their own judgment and assessment and understanding of themselves to decide, if these substances are desired. And then I think also you need to consider the legality of these substances. And for me, I'm recording this video. I shared that other previous video. I still have questions about if I should, challenges around it personally, ethically, legally, just thinking and working through all the consequences of sharing these experiences and even preparation for these experiences, but then also without this sort of, I don't think this sort of grandiosity, just feeling like this is at least important to myself, and also through my own journey and through my own healing experiences, thinking that, the more people that talk about this, and hopefully with some, good intent and everything, the less this is stigmatized, because I think there are truly valuable healing experiences possible when used right with the right information. So that's, I guess, my little disclaimer up front. You can check out the other video. I'll link it somehow. It'll be there. But I guess I'll start with just a couple things right off the bat. I had used a vaporizer for this. And one of the things that I've known for a very long time actually, is I have low lung capacity. And sorry, I think I hit the mic there. The low lung capacity when you are trying to ingest DMT, especially I think through a vaporizer, or I think it's just any ingestion of like a harsh, very dense smoke, is difficult. And then that is, I'm going to try to say this word, exasperated, almost got it, by a huge rush of feeling in your body. And then I would also just say general fear from the experience that you are about to go on. And so for me, in my first experience, those were a few limiters for me to then navigate and then have that experience. And then after sort of reflection, review, some reading, and I'm going to share some resources on this. I think the other piece here that just right off the top is that I did not have a full, what people will call a breakthrough experience. I did a couple sort of attempts at it, a first mild dose where immediately I felt, holy, there is an intensity and a rush that comes over, I would say generally the more the top half of your body. It's definitely targeting at your head, but it seems to come through the chest as well too. And for me, from my old fun days in university and stuff, I would almost have it described as like what a popper would be like, which there's different ways that people describe it, but it's basically marijuana and cigarettes put together, and then that huge head rush that comes with it. Except the head rush that comes with this seems to be much different, and I will elaborate throughout this video on what that actually feels like. And I do wanted to show some sort of images and representations of, the experience that I had. And there's a couple ones that I'm looking for specifically, just in that first experience, even early on. There was a moment where I had, and I'm trying to pull up the actual image. I know I have it somewhere. Here's one. There we go. And again, I apologize that this is, sort of matrixy. But this was a feeling that came through me throughout this experience. And if you remember, I believe this is in the third one. The machines are attacking Zion, and this is like basically after the hole in the wall gets through. And there's a lot of sort of talk around this sort of idea of like sort of mechanical. I mean, the term, sometimes people say mechanical elves. I'll share about my experience with sort of mechanical or industrial. It wasn't necessarily elves, but what I felt like was, even at that first dose, and then I had a second, much stronger dose, was that there was like all these intelligent machines waiting, almost like trying to get onto Zion. And in this case, I was Zion. And as soon as a hole was open, they all just rushed through. And that was the experience that I had on sort of the smoke inhalation and then the initial effects coming through the DMT. And I looked for some other images to represent this. I have a couple, other ones. But if you remember these sort of creatures with the, they've got like the weight. It didn't look like this, but this was the feeling that I had. And it was just this sort of weird sense that they were just waiting for this moment to happen, like this veil to be pierced so that they could then come through. So that's like one really... a first sort of observation I had was that there is this omnipresent intelligence operating engine that, I don't know where it resides, but it is there. It's operating at all times. It is operating seemingly and eternally. And, it's excited that you're there. In fact, it seems like it's been waiting for you to be there. So, I'll just sort of split this into the experience. I had one first attempt where I think I probably got 2.5 sort of puffs in, but because of the lung capacity, I think, first time with that vaporizer specifically, and then the length of holding in, it was, basically a mild, experience, but experience enough for me to definitely get something out of it. And let me show you sort of what I had for this imagery. And I was lucky to have this sort of experience confirmed by a trip sitter who ended up not being, who rotated of being a trip sitter, and then had some similar sort of experience and actually saw an image that I was hoping to show for this and sort of remarked that this was what they saw as well too. So that was actually really reaffirming before I put this video together that, there's some consistencies in this, and that I found something that sort of articulates or represents this. And just for your reference, I generated this image through DALL-E, the image generation. I feel like it was almost unnecessary. It was like an X-ray, but the part that I would say is that it wasn't light to me. It was actually this dark part, and it was covering the entire field of vision that I was having, and they were moving sort of gently, and besides the brain being one part, the other sort of feeling that I had was sort of like worm. But there was sort of this, because of this sort of feeling of sort of intelligence. I didn't necessarily have that feeling of intelligence, but I later did. Brain made more sense from a visual perspective. And I think this is sort of like a representation I had if you would superimpose this across your entire field of vision and remove the actual light part out. Because for me, in the first dose, which was, I think, quite mild, it was generally black besides some light that I could see further ahead, but did not reach in that first experience. And a couple other representations of that, here, same sort of visual feeling, but those all felt consistent with that experience, and was, of course, super interesting. Having psychedelic experiences in the past, I've had experiences with geometric shapes. I've had experiences of looking at, grass or even trees on mushrooms and seeing them sort of contort and move in different ways. So there was some sort of naturalness that it felt to me, and almost a returning to, a psychedelic state that I'm familiar with, that I love. Although, as I progress through this sort of explanation, you realize that the place is different, and for many reasons, this place is different. So I did deal with this sort of lung capacity vaporizer, and then I would say a mix of both fear and fear that was conscious fear and subconscious fear. And I think those were limiting experiences on, especially the first one, the first mild dose. And then with the second dose, what was a really beautiful moment was, after, first of all, I had some insights from a friend who said, if you have, one dose, and basically your fear profile will, in some ways, increase, because you realize that the intensity of this psychedelic substance that DMT is. And so your trepidation of returning back starts to flare up, even if you've actually had a positive experience, which the first experience was, very positive. And I have some ways that I'll show that represented, which are sort of hilarious. And yet On the second experience, I was able to, I think, push through and have, I would say, 3 solid hits, even maybe 3 and there was this experience on the third hit of the vaporizer where this sort of loving, and I keep using this word, like omnipresent intelligence, but caring intelligence, sort of held me and encouraged me to continue on that third puff. And that just gave me this immediate sense of comfort. And as these sort of, feelings were racing, and these feelings sort of race, and you sort of instantly want to lay back and close your eyes, it just gave me comfort through that entire thing, and sort of almost felt like it was catching me and holding me and just encouraging me and saying, hey, I am your guide. Not I, we are your guide. And we're here to support you and guide you through. We're so happy that we're here. We love you. And we're going to get through this together. And so that sort of allowed me to have a much bigger sort of ingestion of DMT. I'm still not sure where it would be from a milligram perspective, just because it seems very difficult to measure from my experience. I will share this Psychedelic Spotlight article with a piece from Maps where it talks about dosage and where I was at. And that was really fascinating. I'll maybe dive deeper into where I think I was at in that, but it was much stronger than the original dose that I had. And so what happened in this experience, I've also tried to bring some images to represent this, and I'll see if I can find the one right away. I would say, and again, I feel weird like that I'm using the Matrix, and there's definitely some self-identification with Neo. I obviously love the movie. I dressed up as him for Halloween one time. It was a lot of fun, and what I would say was that I entered what to me seemed like this very mechanical, industrial world, and I would say that this image doesn't fully represent it, because what I would say I'm seeing, so you can see my mouse on the screen pointing here, like Neo is here, and then there's this sort of opening. And for me, instead of these openings, what I had sort of experienced is like gears. And now I tried to do an image generation with DALL-E, which was not very good. Unfortunately, my prompt game is weak. And so my prompts were not good, and my gears were not good. So I'll flip back to Matrix, which is much more close, I think, to the experience that I had, where it was basically simultaneous gears running at all times. And at first I was thinking like millions. Now I'm thinking more like hundreds, not hundreds, even thousands. And I don't know how many thousands of gears running. And they were almost sort of in different directions, but all simultaneously running at once, and all, industrial, almost like a train firing up and moving. But like, you hear a train and it's sort of like making, these big loud conch, but all of that is necessary for them to train to propel. And so that was the experience that I had, is although it was almost sort of rough in a way, it was also this synchronistic beauty that allowed this engine machine to run. And the other experience that I sort of had, or the feeling that I had, is like every gear here represented something. And I haven't quite been able to articulate. It is a very short experience. And so I'm trying to figure out exactly what these gears were. But one, like just as an example, like one gear might represent love. One might represent health. And what was really fascinating to me is because it almost was like, because it was almost like it knew that I was only going to be there for a short time. It was operating at a very high RPM in a way that was trying to both communicate with me, but then also heal me. And so it almost felt like these gears, even though there was no feeling of that, were like making contact with some part of me that was maybe trauma or angst or suffering, and it was like cleaning it off, almost like a pool cleaner, cleaning off the residue off the side of a pool. And it had sort of this, I wouldn't say it was rushed, because rushed, I don't think it has divine timing, but it has some sort of, just higher RPMs in that moment to try to maximize the time that I spent with it. And I wonder, a curiosity that I have after that experience is that if you are doing, for example, ayahuasca, where it's released, we oral ingestion and then takes a much longer time, would this experience be in a way, would it feel more patient? Would it feel less rushed because it knows it has more time to work with you? And so that's sort of a question that I have, and I've never had an ayahuasca experience. I would love to, but now at least having some connection with whatever this reality is, whatever this universe is, and what I would, questionably think through is that it's almost it's a reality that is there at all times, that we don't have the mental faculties to ingest fully. And I think this is where some parallels with the Matrix sort of do emerge. I also think that there's a defense mechanism that we have built up where if we were processing this much information at once, we would just be laying down at all times. And so it doesn't make sense from a survival perspective to then take this information in at such high resolution and volume and speed at all times. We would just be disabled in some ways. And if we go back to previous times, we would just be eaten by a tiger kind of thing. So that's like sort of a couple of things that I felt. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is just sort of the sound piece of this. And I didn't really know how other way to describe it other than there's a song by Glass Animals, and I can't play it because I don't want to get a copyright claim, but I'll link it in here, and I recommend checking out. It's a great song. Just first of all, I saw them in concert. It was awesome. And it's called It's All So Incredibly Loud. And I'm going to mute it. I don't think they're probably not going to see this much, but this song really builds up and builds up to this moment where it's like this crescendo in the song, and it's just so loud. And that's what the feeling within this hyperspace reality that I was in felt like. It was very loud. It was hard to I'm not saying it was hard to hear anything else, because I could still, for example, there was a bit of noise around me and I could hear that noise, but it was definitely taking over some sort of auditory sense. And it's weird when your auditory sense gets taken over through a mental mechanism. Like, it's not like there's an actual sound in this distinct reality. There's a train just went by. You're not hearing that, but you're hearing it through this. And there was definitely, as some people, and I'm trying to also filter through what I've heard in videos and researched versus my own, I think, individual experience. So I'm actually trying to navigate through what I would say are almost archetypes or experiences that other people have. And I think that's an impossible task. But, I also believe in this sort of shared human collective experience that we have as people. And so there's no doubt in my mind that there are commonalities across our experiences. And so there must be some truth, even if it's a subjective truth that we all feel. And it was almost like a whistling. I might describe it as sort of like a teapot. You sort of have in the movies going off. And that was what was also an indicator for me. I realized after the first experience, the second experience, then in that second session, was that it was an indicator that then I was starting to feel the effects of these psychedelics, and also being able to apologize. We got some trains going, a lot of trains going by here today. And like, that was the experience that I was on this path. And again, I didn't have this full breakthrough experience, but I definitely on the second dose had, a strong sort of encounter with, again, these people describe it as these mechanical elves. For me, it was these gears were what were communicating with me, and were obviously super intelligent. They did not develop into distinct sort of characters or people or things like that, but it was just obvious that these gears were intelligent. And one thing that I will say was that for not to any fault of the person, but the person that was with me during this experience, I think just had some curiosity about the experiences that I was feeling. And so I was trying to relay and articulate some of those experiences. And the piece that I had there is, by trying to articulate this to words in the real time, I think I reduced my reception of the message that these intelligent entities, which there's no other way to describe it as that. Maybe it's one entity, but then that entity is purposely separating into multiple entities. I don't know if that makes us grasp it better or what the purpose of that would be. It feels like multiple entities, but to me, it felt like the reception of that message was then not taken enough for me because I was trying to articulate it. And throughout this, I did some recording and stuff. And so I think there was a couple things that I might not do in future experiences that I think kept me sort of grounded to myself and where I was physically, that then, and then again, are trying to articulate this vocally to this person, that reduced the reception that I had of these intelligent creatures. And because I was doing this sort of articulation through words, and part of it was just like, there was no other choice. I was just saying like, wow, that's super interesting. Like, I almost felt like there was nothing else I could do but say that. It felt like these intelligent entities were so glad I was there, and almost felt like they were patiently waiting for me to stop articulating, so that I could fully hear their message. And and again, all this stuff sounds so wild when you're describing it, but it's just so logical, even in this weird, state. You still have this clairvoyance throughout. They were like patiently waiting. And I sort of talked about this high RPM gears, even though that was sort of happening, this conversation that these entities wanted to have, or this entity wanted to have, they were very patient, even though they were so excited that I was finally there. They sort of just waited, and then when I refocused a bit, they would then restart transmitting me information. That information I still feel. I'm not exactly sure what that is, and so that makes me, first of all, want to have more experiences, but still working through what that looks like and what that feels like, and the time between that and all of those things. I think there's a lot of things to consider there, and I'm grateful for them to be patient, because I feel like I was talking to someone, and I was waiting so long to talk to them, and then they just sort of ignored me. I didn't ignore them. I was just trying to help and work through this with the person. That I would be upset, but they were not upset. They were just like, we understand. And again, this understanding or this communication, none of this is, to me, at least in my experience, was spoken vocally. There was no audio that I was hearing. It was all just transmitted telepathically through these entities. And so that was another sort of experience that I had during this. Again, the sort of talked about sort of like industrial or mechanic. That does feel like there's cultural sort of perpetration. Like, that's where I've received that sort of understanding of this, but it's hard when you're there to deny that that's how it feels. Like, especially my personal experience with the sort of mechanisms were there. And I have another image here that. So first of all, don't disregard the pods here, even though that's enough of a rabbit hole in its own part. More what I felt, these are obviously pods, but they sort of look like gears in these towers in sort of this machine world and in the Matrix. That's the sort of experience that I had in regards to vision again, sort of. So I showed the brain, and then I showed the experience that Neo had in the Matrix. And the other thing was sort of like, these is sort of how the gears looked like, but they were in all different directions, I don't know if different sizes, but then coming at me in different ways. So they weren't all sort of horizontal. Some were vertical, some were sideways, et cetera, et cetera. So again, like a lot of things to consider. One, again, is the sort of speed and intensity of the effects, especially that second dose, second attempt was very, very powerful and overwhelming. And as it encouraged me to finish this sort of final hit on this vaporizer, it was becoming overwhelming. And I can see why what's been recommended in the past is that that you should have someone almost sort of brew the smoke for you when you just suck and inhale, because I think you start to become incapable at that point, or just have this layer of fear. But then I've heard, just through some more research and stuff, that if you're going to go into this, try to get through to this full breakthrough experience. And I've had many psychedelic experiences in my life. People consider this like, one of the sort of connections or descriptions of this is that you're sort of killing yourself temporarily, killing your ego, idea of ego death, ego dissolution. I've had those at high doses of mushrooms, not as much with LSD. Mushrooms have definitely been the biggest provider of that experience. And then in both experiences yesterday, sort of, and then a third less, which I think in the middle, sort of a third attempt that left me sort of in the middle of the first and second, where I think that I had enough. That fear had sort of built up, and then I think I was also just tired from all the information processing. In each one of those experiences, there was sort of my conscious self was still there, and I was definitely somewhere else. I sort of described it as like I was here, but that here was an entire reality. There's an amazing. I'm just thinking about this now for the first time, but there's amazing image or a TV show, The Sex, Death, Robots. Image of tiny civilization in freezer, heart, sex, robots, heart. I don't know if I'm going to get this right. Yes. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to get this image, but basically in this one episode, there is an entire civilization living in the freezer, and really interesting episode. But that's sort of what it felt like, was that there was this, one sec, I'm going to see if I can get out of it just because it's so distinct in my mind right now. Here we go. Beautiful. Good queries, Tyler. You got through to it. So this was the experience that I would say was like I was right there, but the entire civilization, this entire machine world was right beside my conscious head. It was just sort of sitting there. And I would say like that's a fascinating realization in its own right. I'll open this image in a new tab and I'll include it in the resource and sort of have as a reference point. And then I was still able to communicate and then feel noises around me and et cetera, et cetera. Definitely pre-flight jitters, no matter how much I shared in this video, I did a lot of preparation for this mentally, research-wise, years, I would say, of psychedelic experience, ran, ate healthy, made sure that I was in a safe environment, all of those conducive to, I think, both, to me, what I would just summarize as very positive experiences, moments where, I had one experience where I just full out smiling the entire time, and the other experience where I just was just like, wow, just overall sense of awe at the power of this, even sort of having some sort of realization that maybe I'm not able to ingest this full amount that I would like. And so I think, moving forward, if I was to try again and try for a breakthrough experience, I would look at how could I access sort of freebase DMT so that and then because I have done, lots of big bong tokes and stuff in my history. And so I think it's harder to, and then you have to hold longer. So I think you could ingest more successfully than what maybe I did with this vaporizer. And I've heard got some insights around friends about that sort of same thing. So I think that's one thing that I'm sort of thinking about. I'm trying to think about anything else that I would really do sort of just to articulate, the experience that I had on this sort of first journey. I shared about that brain. This is more what it felt like to me, but then again, sort of superimposed across your entire visual field. That's actually a much better representation of the overall experience. And the other pieces I'll think about that I just wanted to share. So this is super sort of interesting. This is my own love of sort of data science and all of this. And so I was able to record these sort of moments through just audio, but then I was able to sort of analyze them with the software that I've built over a long period of time, and started to surface what came out most. And so you can see, some of this visualized, and then you can see, the larger words are actually represented, that I said those more, throughout the experience. And so you can see some swear words, you can see a lot of interesting, which was definitely like that for me. This has been a very exploratory discovery session. And so interesting was a huge one for me. Mechanical still sticks out, engine sticks out to me, and chugging, which I was sort of talking about, the chugging of the train. And so I think I could go back and I could actually take, I could take a deeper look and re-listen to these audio files, or do even deeper analysis of sort of what I've said, both before the experience, during, which again, incredibly short. It's hard to describe how short the experience is. The second one was definitely the longest, and I could feel the sort of visual effects in my head as my eyes were closed. Like it took me 15 minutes probably to want to open my eyes. Interesting part is the dichotomy of eyes open versus eyes closed. For myself, eyes closed is much more enjoyable, but with your eyes open, you could see patterns, geometric patterns, then being sort of overlaid over everything in the room that I was in. And it was inside, nice place, air conditioned, all that stuff. So that made a big difference. But I also had this craving after to have wanted to do it outside, which I think is possible and possibly even valuable, but also less control over the environment around you. So a couple of sort of trade-offs, I think, through that. And overall, I think I'm coming up here on 30 minutes, which makes sense. This was quite a lot of experience. And even though I, again, don't consider myself having a full breakthrough experience, there was an incredible amount of information that was transmitted. I learned so much. I had an amazing, beautiful experience and some breakthroughs around what lies on this other side. And to me, again, a different entity or intelligence than what I would say that you would feel on mushrooms, which is much more earthly and motherly. And throughout my years of mushrooms experience, depending on different times, that motherly could be very tough on you, and in a good way, motherly love. And I'm sure DMT can, but at least my early experiences, maybe they're just being nice to me here at the start, much more all-encompassing love and trying to transmit that love to me and let me know. And maybe that was just it trying to guide me deeper into the experience and get more comfortable. And then maybe it has some hard lessons on the other side. I'm not sure. But overall, that was sort of some of the experience that I have and the difference between that. And then I would say if I parse that and look at LSD, a subset of LSD, much more clinical, doesn't feel as much as there's this, at least the experiences I had, this omnipresent intelligence on the other side that's trying to communicate with you. It's more just this sharp, precise, clinical, which clinical is a bad term, but that's what it feels like, sort of high that makes you clairvoyant and clear and crystal clear, almost like a new pair of these Maui gym glasses that I got that have overlaid, and now I'm realizing they're actually helping me see better. LSD has had that same experience. So there's definitely a difference between these substances. It's nice to understand a little bit of a nuance between that. And I'll, hopefully continue to explore that. I'm grateful. I'm happy. Overall, I feel I'm glad that I had the experience. I'm glad that I work it up. It's obviously scary. It's obviously scary making this video. It's obviously scary sharing it. All of this can be scary, but again, sort of personal curiosity spurs growth. It's always helped me throughout my life, even with some challenges sprinkled in between, and sprinkled a way to put it lightly. If you've had DMT experiences, or you just love this stuff, I would love to hear from you. I'm learning, and I think one of the things that's even scary about these experiences is that you can feel somewhat possibly alienated after you have them. They're definitely outerworldly. They're definitely describing them to people. Even right now, like someone might listen to this and be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But to me, it's so precise and clear. And, that experience with DMT, which is really interesting, is so short lasting and then comes out of your system so quickly. And then you go back to what you feel, basically the same mental state that you were in before. And maybe that changes when you've had a huge breakthrough experience that shatters all understanding of reality. But for me, and I've had that before in earlier stages of my life, for sure. In this case, I, relatively resumed with just a huge wealth of information and knowledge and experience, some which I'm still sorting through and working through. So I would love to connect with people who are having those experiences, who have learned, who maybe are deeper into this and more experienced and have advice for me. The curiosity has definitely not ended. There's this feeling that it remains of this intelligence wants to reconnect with me and wants to tell me things. And those things seem to be directed towards helping me be a better person. Some of those intentions that I said about aligning me with purpose even felt, temporarily, because I didn't last, but like some work on some of the sort of food addiction intention that I had set And, I feel like I'm taking a risk, doing this, sharing these videos, but I'm encouraged by the people who connect with me. And even though this might alienate some people, I think it connects me with the people that I want to be connected with. And that's, truly what I think, I strive for in this world anyways. And I've learned so much from sharing these videos that I hope you learn things, and I hope that we can just be a constant exchange for each other, so that we all become better and healthier and happier, and all the great stuff that comes with shared collaboration and knowledge and community and tribe. And so I think that's it from me. This was Tyler Bryden sharing a trip report, I guess, on my first DMT experience. Again, that this isn't just informational purposes. This is just me sharing. This is not encouragement. I just think that, I felt that I should share. And so here I am doing my best from that experience that I had. And I appreciate you checking this out very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.